Yeah. See a switch.
Let's come back from the break, please. Go ahead. All right. When we broke for lunch, we had just completed our first public comment session. and immediately prior to that had broken into the middle of Mr. Herman's testimony. So, Mr. Herman, you have 15 minutes gone of your hour. And if you would please resume. Mr. Knight.
Thank you. Madam Hearing Officer, Mr. Chair, and members of the commission, when we left off, we were talking about definitions in the proposed rule. So, Mr. Herman, the third topic you identified is the definitions related to domestic wastewater and feasibility studies. What definitions does your direct testimony address, and can you provide a brief summary of your testimony?
Sure. This portion of my testimony focused on 7 definitions that related to direct and indirect potable reuse, domestic wastewater, and feasibility studies. The definitions all are proposed as new definitions and will assist the department in implementation of the potable reuse section of the proposed regulations. My testimony includes reasoning and evidence for the following terms: direct potable application, domestic wastewater, environmental buffer, feasibility study, indirect potable application, potable, and reclaimed wastewater.
Did any party object to this section?
Yes, multiple parties objected to most of the definitions in this category of terms, including new energy economy and Amigos, Bravos, and Sierra Club.
And again, as you understand it, what is the basis of these objections?
My understanding is that most of the objections stated that there was confusion between the intent of the proposed regulations, produced water, and potable applications. Some objections suggested that a single type of potable application was more appropriate and the definition for environmental buffer was not necessary. One objection included the same argument that some terms are either not used in the regulations or are only used in other definitions.
And what is the department's response to these objections?
The department believes that the proposed regulations are written in a clear and concise manner that does not conflate produced water and potable applications. The two types of activities are clearly separated into 2 different sections of the proposed regulations. Further, the department believes that the definitions as proposed for environmental buffers believes that the definitions as proposed for environmental buffers, different potable applications, and feasibility studies are appropriate and necessary to allow communities in the state to advance their potable reuse projects. The department has the same response to the objections regarding the definitions used in the regulations and their intended use for implementation.
The fourth topic you identified is the direct and indirect potable applications section of the proposed regulation. Can you provide a brief summary of your testimony in that section?
Yes, this portion of my testimony focused on feasibility studies and the importance of delineating the differences between the direct and indirect potable reuse projects. The inclusion of an environmental buffer in a project is the most prominent differential between the 2 types of potable reuse scenarios, and having definitions for each aspect of these types of projects is critical when evaluating their feasibility, as would be determined by the feasibility studies identified in this section.
Did any party object to this section?
Yes, New Energy Economy, Amigos Bravos, and Sierra Club objected to portions of this section.
What is the basis of those objections?
The objections again conflated the potable water and the produced water sections, thinking that the department was proposing to allow for produced water to be used in potable water applications. Some of the parties object to the inclusion of the potable reuse sections in its entirety. Specifically, New Energy Economy testified that the department failed to include a requirement for economic feasibility studies related to produced water, and Amigos Bravos and Sierra Club proposed to remove the differentiation between direct and indirect potable applications and complete removal of the definition for environmental buffer.
What is the department's response to those objections?
The department again believes that the proposed regulations are very clear, that they are different sections for different reuse types, and that potable applications are a different type of reuse type than the produced water one. The confusion and consternation about direct and indirect potable applications, as well as environmental buffers, are not supported by the evidence submitted by the department. As I stated in my rebuttal testimony, regulations often include multiple sections in each chapter that address different aspects of an overall activity type. The department contends that the supplemental reuse regulations are the correct regulatory location for the potable reuse section, and that it is appropriate to delineate between direct and indirect potable applications, which can mostly be done by determining if an environmental buffer is included in the project. The department also does not believe that requiring economic feasibility studies is within the purview of the Water Quality Act and would not be categorized as something that would protect ground or surface waters.
The fifth topic you identified is the produced water reuse section of the proposed regulation. Can you provide a brief summary of your testimony for that section?
Sure. The department believes that the proposed regulations, I should be specific. So the department believes that the proposed regulations accomplish two major things in the produced water reuse section. First, we are closing a regulatory loophole that would allow anyone to apply for a groundwater discharge permit and place the department in the position of being required to develop a draft permit under existing regulations, regardless of if the source water is treated produced water. The produced water section includes explicit prohibitions on the discharge of produced water or treated produced water. Second, we are providing a very narrow path for research to be conducted and for industrial projects to move forward in a manner that is safe, and so that produced water is not discharged in a manner that may move directly or indirectly into ground or surface water.
Did any party object to this section?
Yes, multiple parties objected to the produced water reuse section.
Okay, and again, as you understand it, what is the basis of these objections?
The majority of these objections were again based on conflating the potable reuse and produced water reuse sections and did not appear to understand the delineation being made between the two types of reuse. Another objection was the assertion that the department was creating loopholes and giving away the authority to regulate aspects of treated produced water.
And what is the department's response to these objections?
As I stated previously, the department believes that the proposed regulations are clear and concise and do not conflate the two types of reuses, and that the proposed regulations are drafted in a manner that fulfills the requirements of the ground and surface water protection regulations and is protective of human health and the environment.
Did any of these parties propose alternative language?
Yes, some of the parties included red line strike-through versions of the proposed regulations. The revisions suggested by the parties include some minor changes that the department agrees with and which are covered by my colleague's testimony. The only major suggested changes that the department agrees with are the suggested additions to the notice of intent section. Amigos Bravos and Sierra Club suggest that the inclusion of volume and quality into the required submission information for treated produced water notices of intent. These two requirements should have been included originally, and the department supports their inclusion in the proposed regulations.
The sixth topic you identified is the implementation of the proposed regulations. Can you provide a brief summary of your testimony on that subject?
Sure. The department plans on implementing the promulgated regulations immediately upon promulgation by the WQCC. Implementation will include limited changes from the manner in which the department has already been applying the requirements of the Water Quality Act and the Produced Water Act for what we previously called produced water pilot projects.
Okay, did any party object to this section?
No.
Okay, the seventh topic you identified is the potential consequences for not adopting the regulations as drafted. Can you provide a brief summary of your testimony on that subject?
Yes, the regulations that are in place now do not have the protections and mechanisms necessary to adequately protect ground and surface waters from discharges of treated produced water. The permitting regulations do not explicitly prohibit treated produced water discharges and do not give the department the power to deny a permit based on the type of water being discharged. It is not a matter of being afraid of an appellate court or the WQCC. It's a matter of implementation of the permitting regulations in a manner that is defensible. The proposed regulations are both protective of ground and surface water as they relate to human health and the environment.
Let's see, did any party object to that portion?
Yes, there was some rebuttal to this part of my testimony.
Okay. And what is the basis of those objections?
The New Energy Economy and New Mexico Oil and Gas Association representatives that objected did not provide specific rebuttal to the fact that we are closing a loophole, with one simply stating that my assertion that a permit would have to be drafted is incorrect, and the other stated that the department should not fear the WQCC or appellate court if we were to draft a permit for produced water that was then appealed.
Understood. And what is the department's response to those objections?
Well, I do not have a response to the testimony that simply stated I was wrong, as I don't understand what their basis was. The testimony that the department should not fear having a permit appealed fails to contemplate the amount of effort, time, and taxpayer money that goes into defending a draft discharge permit. The process takes a huge amount of my section's budget and staff time and takes time away from the objectives like enforcement. It would be extremely bad management to move forward under the belief that somehow it will all work out and an appeal to the WQCC or state court is just the inevitable path for a draft permit.
Can you briefly describe what types of activities would require a discharge permit and therefore would not be eligible to be an industrial project or demonstration project?
Yes, the Groundwater Quality Bureau requires discharge permits for many activities that do not appear to fit the basic definition of being a discharge. The primary example would be impoundments or lagoons. Under the 2026.2 regulations and the proposed supplemental regulations, all impoundments or lined ponds would require a discharge permit, and as drafted, the proposed regulations would not allow a produced water demonstration project or industrial project that includes an impoundment of any kind.
Can you briefly describe what a non-discharging project would be that is not closed loop?
Sure, there are two examples of notices of intent that have been submitted to the department for review that are non-discharging but are also not considered closed loop. The first is a project that is testing the potential to grow plants using treated produced water in an above ground grow box that is not touching the ground. They will treat produced water through an RO system and use the permeate to water the plants. Any produced water and remaining treated produced water will be combined back together and disposed of in the existing saltwater disposal well. All materials used to grow the plants and the plants themselves are required to be disposed of in an appropriately permitted disposal facility. The other project proposes to grow hemp in impoundments, originally proposed to grow hemp in impoundments, and the department required the applicant to modify their plan to be grown inside of lined above ground containers that are elevated to ensure there is no potential for any kind of produced water to make contact with the ground surface.
Okay. Does that conclude your oral testimony?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Herman.
I would like to call Kathleen Murphy, my next witness. Okay.
Ms. Murphy, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And if you would spell your name for the transcript.
Kathleen, Kathleen, Murphy, Murphy.
Right. Good. Okay. What is your current position?
I am the Produced Water Project Manager for the Groundwater Quality Bureau with the New Mexico Environment Department.
And how long have you held this position?
I've held this position for 2 years in April 2024.
And what duties are entailed by this position?
As provided in my written direct testimony, my job duties include to serve as an in-house produced water expert for produced water related to groundwater protection, to provide technical review of proposed treatment technologies, demonstration projects, water quality data analysis and related publications, to prepare written testimony and serve as an expert witness for produced water regulations and permitting actions, to keep current on produced water research, to participate in the New Mexico Produced Water Research Consortium working groups, also known as the consortium, and to interact with entities outside of NMED, including universities, non-governmental organizations, stakeholders, owners, industry, and various state and federal agencies regarding produced water.
Please summarize your post-high school education.
I have a Bachelor of Science degree in geology from the Ohio State University and a Master of Science degree from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln.
Can you tell us about your work experience relevant to the proceeding before the commission?
I have been employed with the NMED for 2 years, and prior to that, I was employed at the Oil Conservation Division for over 3 years as an advanced petroleum specialist. In that role, I was a hearing examiner for the Oil Conservation Division and wrote hearing orders for saltwater disposal wells, compulsory pooling units, and water floods. Prior to that, I worked at the State Land Office as a GIS analyst on a large right-of-way project. I have worked for the state of New Mexico since 2016. Previous work as a GIS analyst included work for a Native American tribe, a national park, and environmental consultants. The details of my job duties can be found on my CV, which is NMED Exhibit 9.
Have you reviewed the direct technical testimony as filed by the parties in this matter?
Yes.
Did you submit technical testimony in this matter?
My direct technical testimony was filed as NMED Exhibit 4. My rebuttal testimony was filed as NMED Exhibit 178.
Do you have any changes or corrections to that technical testimony?
Yes, there are 4. On page 16, line 14 in my direct testimony, which is Exhibit 4, it should say 504,867,983 MCF. On page 16, line 21, it should say 2,188,623,951 MCF. On page 26, line 14 of my direct testimony, I would like to clarify that the department has processed 7 standard notices of intent from entities wanting to complete research associated with the treatment of produced water. My testimony states 9. And lastly, on page 22, line 14 of my rebuttal testimony, again filed as NMED Exhibit 178, the word not should be inserted between the word may and directly. This concludes my corrections.
Okay, do you then adopt that pre-filed written testimony here today with those corrections?
I do.
And what is the nature of your testimony today?
My testimony today summarizes produced water quantity, produced water quality, and the demonstration projects as detailed in my written and rebuttal testimony.
Okay, let's to begin with, let's discuss some of the issues relating to getting accurate data on produced water quantity. What are some of the limitations of this data quality?
As stated in my testimony, there are data quality issues when using the OCD publicly available data, and this is related to the date of download and whether operators are able to edit data for prior years, which does occur. Thus, the produced water data generally may be used for course predictions.
Is there a current example of why getting a better estimate of produced water quantities is important?
As stated in my testimony, Scanlon et al. Predicts a 70 to 80-year feedstock of produced water in the Delaware Basin, whereas the Texas Produced Water Consortium predicts produced water volumes in adjacent Texas counties to start to decrease in 2028. These are applicable studies to New Mexico, but make vastly different predictions regarding future produced water volumes. Having accurate volume data along with the sources is critical to designing non-discharging produced water research. For example, if there is insufficient quantity for offsetting a particular end goal, entities should know this to determine viability of the research efforts or make informed decisions to redirect research to more viable endpoints.
Is there another example on a local scale of why accuracy in produced water quantity is needed?
Yes, and as stated in my written testimony, Scanlon et al. Also estimates the available produced water volumes in the Delaware Basin of New Mexico would satisfy between 1 and 12% of the irrigation demands in in Eddy and Lee counties respectively. This contrasts with claims that treated produced water is an abundant and viable product for use in irrigation in New Mexico. Knowing the volume and location of produced water that is not able to be recycled in oil and gas operations is vital to understanding what water quality and treatment methods should be researched. The quality of water in unconventional wells or horizontal wells in the Delaware Basin, as mentioned, is significantly different than the wells in the San Juan Basin. A thorough study would give New Mexico a clearer understanding of the available quantity with respect to each of the basins. This is important for determining water quality and thus treatment technologies.
So, although accuracy is less than ideal, what information of value was the department able to extract from the available water quality data?
The department was able to determine where the majority of unrecycled produced water is generated, and to some extent, the type of wells that are generating the water.
In your testimony, did you state that there are over 2 billion barrels of produced water generated in New Mexico each year?
Yes, according to the 2022 publicly available OCD data, this volume has doubled from 1 billion barrels since 2018.
And where is most of this produced water located?
As stated in my testimony, in 2022, the Delaware Basin generated over 2 billion barrels of produced water, whereas the San Juan Basin generated 25 million barrels. The Delaware Basin generates 98% of the produced water in the state.
Okay, so the Delaware Basin generates by far the most produced water.
Yes.
Which type of wells are unable to recycle their produced water?
As stated in my testimony, horizontal wells, also known as unconventional wells, are unable to recycle their excess produced water.
Why can't horizontal wells recycle produced water?
Horizontal wells cannot recycle their produced water because they are completed within tight shale and sandstone formations, which are not as porous or permeable as other formations.
Okay, and how many horizontal wells are there currently in New Mexico?
According to OCD publicly available data, there are 8,400 active horizontal wells and 10,600 horizontal wells proposed as new. 95% of these new wells are proposed in the Delaware Basin.
How is this significant to produced water quantity in New Mexico currently and in the future?
Horizontal wells generate excess produced water that cannot currently be recycled within these formations. This results in 98% of produced water being generated in the Delaware Basin, with 10,600 horizontal wells currently proposed in these formations, and 95% of these wells proposed for the Delaware Basin. Excess produced water will continue to be an issue in the coming years.
And currently, where does this produced water go?
Most produced water is disposed of through SWDs, also known as saltwater disposal wells, or reused in the hydraulic fracturing and completions within the oil and gas industry.
In your testimony, did you state that in 2022 in the Delaware Basin, approximately half the produced water generated was reinjected through SWDs?
Yes, this is seen on charts from OCD data and submitted in my testimony as NMED exhibits 119 and 120.
How much produced water was reused by industry in hydraulic fracturing and completions in New Mexico?
As stated in my testimony and according to the 2022 OCD water use report, the oil and gas industry recycled 271 million barrels of produced water in hydraulic fracturing and completions, or 60% of the total water used. Still, this is only 13% of the over 2 billion barrels of produced water generated in 2022. This is seen in a chart submitted as NMED Exhibit 122.
Okay, and why is knowing produced water quantity relevant to the proposed regulation?
Again, most of the produced water that is not recycled is generated in the Delaware Basin. This is significant for raw water characterization and potential treatment options. As discussed in my direct testimony, the variability within and between basins impacts the constituents that could cause harm to human health and the environment.
All right, let's turn our attention to produced water quality. In your professional opinion, what are some of the best New Mexico specific sources of produced water quality data that are available? In other words, the raw data that generally comes from sampling before analysis.
As stated in my testimony, produced water quality data specific to New Mexico is available from the USGS Produced Waters database and the New Mexico Tech GoTech webpage.
Okay, and what can be concluded from the available produced water quality data?
As stated in my testimony, source water characterization is inconclusive at this time. This is because available data are scant and in many cases only provide field data from conventional wells. Although field data are helpful, they do not provide concentrations for constituents that could jeopardize protection of ground and surface waters. Additionally, by having limited data for the unconventional or horizontal wells which employ the hydraulic fracturing, these data sets lack lab analysis for compounds that could be present in fracked produced water, in addition to the naturally occurring constituents that are of concern for protection of human health and the environment.
Before we move on, can you clarify whether the proprietary chemicals used in hydraulic fracturing are the same?
It is generally understood that there are a variety of proprietary blends being used. But until the source water characterization is done for a large enough sample size to compare, the variability in fracking fluid and its interaction with the various formation water remains largely unknown.
Next, let's discuss produced water quality studies, those that have used the raw data to conduct analyses and develop conclusions. What can be concluded from the available produced water quality studies?
As provided in my testimony regarding quantity, horizontal wells in the Delaware Basin are currently the wells the department is most focused on, since the produced water from these wells generates the greatest quantity, which is not recycled in oil and gas operations. Completions of these horizontal wells involve hydraulic fracturing with proprietary chemicals. Without metadata for these studies, the department is unable to draw informed conclusions. Thus, although many of these journal documents are informational, they are not sufficient in and of themselves to provide the basis for public policy decision making.
Okay, what are proprietary chemicals?
I stated in my testimony and provided in FRAC Focus's additive webpage, proprietary chemicals are additives used by industry in the hydraulic fracturing and completion process. These compounds are not disclosed to the public as to what their constituents are.
Where does one find information about proprietary chemicals?
The FRAC Focus database has information on individual wells that have been hydraulically fractured. This database indicates some operators use more than 10 proprietary chemicals, whereas others report using none.
What lab analyses are proposed to identify these constituents?
As stated in my rebuttal testimony, the consortium has proposed a three-tiered analysis protocol developed by the two risk and toxicology working groups over 2+ years, consisting of well-credentialed scientists from academia, state and federal government, NGOs, and industry. The three-tiered analysis protocol includes lab analysis according to the NPDES Plus list, whole effluent toxicology, also called wet testing, and non-targeted analysis testing.
Where can one find information on this three-tiered analysis protocol from the consortium?
The publication entitled Guidance on Treated and Untreated Produced Water Sampling Procedure, dated May 15, 2023, and written by the consortium, can be found under the reference documents on the consortium's webpage and is filed with the department's rebuttal testimony as Exhibit 199.
To your knowledge, have any of the 7 demonstration projects you discussed sampled for the full suite of constituents in the consortium's three-tiered analysis protocol for both raw produced water and treated produced water?
No. As discussed in my rebuttal testimony filed as NMED Exhibit 178, there is one subjective project that was conducted in the San Juan Basin, but the department has not received analytical data using the protocol for any demonstration project in the Delaware Basin. No project has tested both raw and treated produced water according to the consortium's guidelines.
Will the consortium's three-tiered lab analyses protocol change in the future?
It may or may not. For example, as more lab analysis data sets are submitted to the NMED and made public in the consortium's WaterStar water data portal, data may indicate that some analytes are consistently not identified in produced water, whereas others are consistently identified. The list of analytes may increase or decrease over time based on additional credible scientific data.
What is the WaterStar Water Data Portal?
The WaterStar Water Data Portal is the public GIS database that was designed by the consortium to house produced water, quantity and quality water data from horizontal wells. It is currently active as a web page and has produced water quantity data, but only basic produced water quality field data.
What is the process proposed for the analyses and treatment of produced water?
The produced water and treated produced water must be thoroughly characterized. Raw produced water would be analyzed according to the consortium's guidelines, processed through a treatment train, then analyzed again according to the consortium's guidelines to test the efficacy of the treatment train in removing contaminants.
What are NMED's expectations for data to be considered defensible scientific data?
NMED requires supporting QA/QC of data, which provides quality assurance of sampling methodologies, sampling locations, data acquisition and management, lab analysis methodologies, chain of custodies to show holding times and sample preservation, trip blank analysis to demonstrate quality control for cross-contamination of the samples, and validation and verification of the data. In part, this requires lab analysis at a NELAP certified lab.
On page 4 of Jacoby's rebuttal testimony for NMOGA, he states you oppose the public distribution of information that addresses naturally occurring radioactive material or NORM. Can you identify where in your testimony you state this?
I did not state this in either my direct testimony or rebuttal testimony. In my position as the produced water project manager, there is an absolute responsibility for scientific evidence to be made public to develop regulations.
Okay, let's move on and discuss demonstration projects. What are demonstration projects?
Demonstration projects, as proposed to be defined in this rule, are non-discharging produced water research projects with the explicit intent to characterize produced water, evaluate the treatment methodologies, and determine attainable effluent quality, to evaluate the potential use of treated produced water outside of the oil and gas industry. These demonstration projects must operate in a manner that is protective of ground and surface water quality, in part by demonstrating that they are closed loop with no discharges to ground or surface water.
And how does one apply to conduct a demonstration project in New Mexico?
An interested party would submit an NMED notice of intent, which is also called an NOI, to the department.
Okay, is the NOI an application to discharge?
No, the NOI is a separate process to allow the department to determine and ensure the project is not proposing any form of discharge. An application is a separate process, and given this proposed rule explicitly prohibits discharges, any application to discharge would be denied pending adoption of this rule.
Okay, where is the information regarding the NMED NOI process found?
As stated in my testimony, information about the NOI submittal process in current and past demonstration projects can be found on the NMED Public Produced Water webpage under Guidelines and Forms and Produced Water Pilot Projects.
Does the proposed rule prescribe what treatment process a demonstration project should use?
No, the rule only provides the mechanism to get a determination from the department that the project is not discharging and therefore not a threat to ground or surface waters within the department's regulatory authority.
Is there an advantage to conducting a demonstration project?
Yes, a demonstration project could test a technology, see what part of the process works or does not work, reconfigure and adjust as necessary, and provide needed, credible scientific data in the form of lab analysis. An applicant would then have defensible data that the project worked and could scale up. Financial resources could be expended more efficiently.
Why is the NOI process needed in the current proposed rule?
The department has a NOI process in place in 20.6.2 NMAC, but it is limited in scope and enforceability, placing the burden to determine if there is a discharge on the entity, not the department. The proposed rule provides the authority for NMED to determine if a demonstration project is non-discharging and requires additional information needed by the department that extends beyond the requirements in 20.6.2 NMAC to ensure consistency in evaluating and making determinations for industry-specific types of projects. By submitting the produced water NOI as proposed in 20.6.8 NMAC, New Mexico citizens will have access to information concerning all produced water demonstration projects being conducted within the state, as this data is posted on the NMED Produced Water webpage. In this rule, it is mandatory to submit an NOI, whereas in 20.6.2 NMAC, it is not mandatory to submit an NOI for a non-discharging project. As stated already, NMED needs the authority to make a determination as to whether a proposed produced water project is non-discharging.
Currently, does NMED know where all the produced water demonstration projects are occurring in the state?
It is unclear. There may be projects occurring in the state that have not submitted an NOI to NMED, and thus NMED has not had the opportunity to determine if they are non-discharging.
Okay, your rebuttal testimony responding to the consortium, NMOGA, details the premise that other states are discharging produced or treated produced water without controversy or environmental consequences.
Yes.
What other states were mentioned as currently discharging produced water or treated produced water?
California, Wyoming, Pennsylvania, Colorado, and Arkansas are mentioned by others and are mentioned in others' testimony. California, Wyoming, and Pennsylvania are referenced in more detail in my rebuttal testimony.
And is the implication that because other states are discharging produced or treated produced water, so should New Mexico do likewise? Is this a valid assumption?
No, as provided in my direct testimony, produced waters from areas with varying formations and geochemistry, well development, and extraction processes are not comparable as seen in New Mexico, just between the San Juan and Delaware basins. Broad superficial statements within the context of a declaratory few sentences are disingenuous and do not present the full picture.
Can you quickly summarize key points from your rebuttal testimony for a couple of these states and why discharges in these states are not comparable? And also, importantly, whether there have been implications as a result of these discharges pertaining to protection of human health and the environment.
As summarized in my rebuttal testimony, a quick summary does not do justice to this complicated subject. First, California has indeed allowed the discharge of treated produced water for the past 30 years in one county for irrigation. However, only produced water from non-fracked wells is used as a fractional component of river water. There have been recent investigations by a food safety expert panel based on allegations concerning threats to food safety from using oil field produced water on crops. Second, Wyoming, which also has a long history of discharging produced or treated produced water to ground and surface water, mostly discharges coal bed methane produced water from one basin, which may be similar to the San Juan Basin produced water, but not to Delaware Basin produced water, where most all of the unrecycled produced water is generated in New Mexico. Recently, as provided in an article submitted as NMED Exhibit 197, an operator in Wyoming violated their permit conditions, which impacted a community's drinking water sources and what resulted in 2 streams becoming impaired. These streams flow into a reservoir that is a drinking water source for 3,000 people. And lastly, a Duke University study regarding discharges in Pennsylvania indicated that high levels of radioactivity persisted in stream sediment downstream of the discharge point of a centralized waste treatment facility where produced water was treated. The radioactivity measured at these sites was 650 times higher than at unaffected stream sites upstream. The study concluded that the contamination came from conventional or non-fracked oil and gas wastewater.
These examples are not necessarily comparable or applicable to New Mexico produced water.
Correct. They are not necessarily comparable or applicable.
However, what we can say is that these states are discharging produced or treated produced water, and in at least some cases, there were environmental consequences.
Yes.
Given the current state of knowledge regarding produced water, could the department propose reuse regulations similar to these other states that would be protective of ground and surface water?
No. Most of New Mexico water's resources serve rural and underserved communities. The concept of permitting discharges without extensive source water characterization, well-studied treatment methodologies, and protective criteria for applications that ensure protection of ground and surface water is contrary to the Water Quality Act.
All right. Thank you. That concludes this witness's testimony.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Murphy.
I'll give it all. Shall we just keep moving?
I think so.
Okay.
It's been less than an hour.
I would like to call Lei Hu, witness.
Dr. Hu, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. And if you would spell your name for the transcript.
Yeah, my name is Lei Hu, Leihu.
Thank you.
And Dr. Hu, what is your current position?
I'm the producer water project manager with the New Mexico Environmental Department Surface Water Quality Bureau.
And how long have you held this position?
I have been the producer water project manager for 2 years.
And what duties are entailed by this position?
My job duties as the producer water project manager include serve as an in-house expert for producer water related to surface water protection, provide technical assistance and review of proposed treatment technologies, demonstration projects, and related water quality research, analysis, and reports, prepare written testimony, and serve as an expert witness for producer water permit, and raw hearings using technology and applicable rules, regulations, work with NMED attorneys to prepare and participate in hearings before the NMED Secretary or WQCC by providing oral testimony and sitting for cross-examination by other parties. Serve as agency representative and interact with several entities outside of NMED, including universities, water research institutes, non-government organizations, stakeholders, landowners, industry, and different state and federal agencies regarding producer water and related treatment technologies. Participate in the New Mexico Producer Water Research Consortium and contribute to working group products, and assist with stakeholder outreach related to proposed water reuse regulatory revisions and or new initiatives.
All right. Please summarize your post-high school education.
I have a Bachelor of Science degree in Environmental Engineering from China University of Mining and Technology, a Master of Science degree in Environmental Science from the same university, and a Doctor of Philosophy degree in Environmental Engineering from New Mexico State University.
Do you hold any certifications or have you received any additional professional training relevant to the proceeding before the commission today?
Yes, I attended and received certifications from EPA's Water Quality Standards Academy and the EPA NPDES Permit Writers course.
Can you tell us about your work experience relevant to the proceeding before the commission today?
Before my current position, I served as a postdoctoral researcher at the Georgia Institute of Technology for 8 months, and as a graduate research assistant at New Mexico State University for 4 years. I received my PhD in environmental engineering from New Mexico State University in 2021, focusing my dissertation research on producer water treatment and toxicity assessment. I have served in various capacities over my 7 years career, with work related to producer water treatment, environmental toxicology, resource recovery, environmental chemistry, desalination, project management, and regulatory development. The details of my job duties can be found in my CV, which has been submitted as NMED Exhibit 10.
Okay. Have you authored or co-authored any articles related to your professional training?
Yes, I have 13 publications, some of which related to my testimony, including co-authoring an opinion paper on safe reuse of treated produced water outside oil and gas fields, a review of current practice, challenges, opportunities, and a risk-based pathway for produced water treatment and fit-for-purpose reuse. A research paper on toxicological characterization of produced water from the Permian Basin. A technical report on characterization of produced water in the Permian Basin for potential beneficial use. A research paper on biomineralization of hypersaline produced water using microbially induced acid precipitation. A research paper on treatment of produced water in the Permian Basin for hydraulic fraction, comparison of different calculation processes, and innovative filter media, and a research paper on simultaneous recovery of ammonium, potassium, and magnesium from produced water by situ-wet precipitation.
Thank you. Have you reviewed the direct technical testimony as filed by the parties in this matter?
Yes,
And did you submit technical testimony in this matter?
yes. My direct technical testimony was submitted as NMED Exhibit 5. My rebuttal testimony was submitted as NMED Exhibit 179.
Okay. Do you have any changes or corrections to your written testimony?
No,
Okay. Do you adopt that pre-filed written testimony as your testimony here today?
yes, I do.
Okay. What is the nature of your testimony today?
My direct written testimony focuses on the produced water characteristics and the treatment technologies, all supported by credible scientific data. I'm testifying on 11 referential definitions that have already been defined in State's Water Quality Act, NMSA 1978, Section 74-6-1. The state's ground and surface water protection regulations 20.6.2 NMAC, and the state's standards for interstate and intrastate surface waters 20.6.4 NMAC. Additionally, my testimony will discuss the current findings of primary scientific research concerning produced water characteristics and treatment technologies.
I would like to shift towards the specifics of the rule as provided in your direct and rebuttal testimony. You mentioned testifying on the 11 referential definitions that have already been defined in other state regulations. Why did the department include certain referential definitions in the proposed rule?
The purpose of including these referential definitions in the proposed rule is to aid in implementation and maintain consistency with other state or federal regulations. This reference, being part of a supplemental rule, serves to clarify that a term is defined in an alternative location with a specified meaning. Given that the industry and or other concerned parties may not be familiar with 20.6.2 NMAC and 20.6.4 NMAC, these definitions were added as references to enhance clarity and conciseness in the language used.
Let's transition to primary scientific research on the characteristics and treatment technologies of produced water. Dr. Hu, can you provide an overview of the characteristics of produced water based on primary scientific research?
Yes, as provided in my direct written testimony, the constituents found in produced water are diverse and variable, including elements such as oil, grease, suspended solids, dissolved solids, heavy metals, naturally occurring radioactive materials, dissolved gases, microorganisms, and a wide range of other known or unknown compounds. Based on a comprehensive literature review conducted by researchers from the Environmental Defense Fund, a total of 1,198 chemicals have been identified in produced water from onshore oil and gas production sites in Canada, Mexico, or the United States. These include toxic organic and inorganic compounds. The physical and chemical characteristics of produced water from both conventional and unconventional well exhibit significant variability influenced by factors such as geographic location, geological history, the type of hydrocarbon product being produced, and the well age.
Can you briefly differentiate between conventional and unconventional wells?
Conventional wells extract oil and gas from permeable rock formations using natural reservoir pressure, while unconventional wells utilize advanced techniques like hydraulic fracturing to access resources trapped in low permeability formations such as shear and tight sandstone.
Can you provide an overview of the current research status regarding the characteristics of produced water in the United States with a focus on primary scientific studies?
Yes, to date, the predominant focus of studies pertaining to produced water characterization in the United States has been centered on the Appalachian Basin in Pennsylvania. According to the data from U.S. Energy Information Administration, the Permian Basin, located in southeastern New Mexico and western Texas, stands out as the largest oil producing basin in the United States, contributing to about 43% of U.S. crude oil production and 17% of U.S. natural gas production in June 2022. However, research on produced water characterization in the Permian Basin remains limited, particularly concerning produced water from unconventional wells. The majority of produced water samples from the Permian Basin, as documented in U.S. Geological Survey, National Produced Waters Geochemical Database version 2.3, was collected before 2002. Specifically, out of 114,943 datasets in the USGS database, only around 3,800 are associated with the Permian Basin. These samples mostly come from conventional wells. However, out of the 3,800 database, only 39 samples collected in 2016 are included in USGS database, providing exceptionally limited information on inorganic water quality measures and metals.
Okay. What are the typical characteristics of produced water in the Permian Basin?
As stated in my direct written testimony, it's clear that produced water is not uniform even within the same basin. Produced water contains a wide range of compositions from simple to highly complex. Therefore, making conclusions about its characteristics based on one of a few studies is insufficient due to its variability.
Could you share a recent study regarding the produced water characteristics in the Permian Basin?
Yes, a research team from New Mexico State University conducted a comprehensive analysis targeting 309 constituents within produced water samples from 5 distinct locations within the Permian Basin. Their findings revealed that the detection of 91 analytes, while 218 analytes remained undetected. Also informative, as discussed in great details in Kathleen Murphy's direct written technical testimony, this sample design limits what can be said about produced water characterizations in the Permian Basin. According to their findings, produced water samples from unconventional wells in the Permian Basin exhibited total dissolved solids concentrations ranging from 100,800 to 201,500 milligrams per liter. A wide range of constituents including mineralized salts, metals, oil and grease, volatile and semi-volatile organic compounds, naturally occurring radioactive materials, ammonia, hydraulic fraction additives, and PFAS were identified at varying concentrations.
Has the produced water been fully characterized?
No, produced water is not fully characterized at present. As discussed in my direct written testimony, in addition to its naturally occurring constituents, produced water may contain chemical additives introduced during drilling operations to address operational challenges and improve oil-water separation. Those additives contains a wide range of substances, including corrosion inhibitors, scale inhibitors, and more. Moreover, hydraulic fraction operations involve the use of chemical additives, some of which are not fully disclosed due to trade secrets. Therefore, it's very important to conduct a non-targeted analysis to discern these unknown chemicals present in produced water.
Have any published scientific studies focused on so-called non-target analysis of produced water?
As of now, only one preliminary study by New Mexico State University and the EPA has been published on non-targeted analysis of produced water. This research focuses on developing the methodology for non-targeted analysis and provides results for a single pre-treated produced water sample from the Permian Basin, New Mexico. However, the findings of this study lack representativeness for regulatory development. It also underscores the need for non-targeted chemical screening, as the majority of the compounds identified in our study are not found in existing produced water database.
See, why is it important to fully characterize produced water?
Defining the range and the concentrations of constituents within produced water is critical in determining appropriate and effective treatment technologies for produced water management. Given the varied composition and the concentrations of contaminants in produced water, a wide range of treatment technologies, including multiple unit processes, is necessary to effectively remove contaminants that may not be sufficiently addressed by a single method. The treatment processes selected will depend on the water chemistry of produced water.
And what is the current typical treatment process for produced water?
A typical produced water treatment process for reusing the treated water for fracking includes 3 stages: primary treatment, secondary treatment, and tertiary treatment.
Okay, what is the primary treatment stage?
The primary treatment stage is related to the removal of oil droplets and suspended solid particles range from 5 to 15 micrometers in size. This stage relies on the principles of gravity or density difference, typically employing large purpose-built tanks. Through this process, denser suspended solids and disposed oil set out or separated out of the water.
Okay, and what is the secondary treatment stage?
The secondary treatment phase is aimed to further reducing particles, dissolved hydrocarbons, scale-forming metabolites, and gases using various gas flotation processes, chemical calculation, and electron calculation.
What is the purpose of the tertiary treatment stage?
Tertiary treatment is used to further reduce turbidity and the concentrations of also small droplets of oil and other impurities left from secondary and primary treatment.
Are there advanced treatment and post-treatment technologies available for produced water?
Yes. Advanced treatment refers to desalination processes that significantly reduce the total dissolved solids or produced water. The 2 major categories of advanced treatment are membrane-based and thermal-based technicals. Post-treatment technicals such as ion exchange and advanced oxidation processes are employed after advanced treatment to remove trace constituents like BTEX and ammonia depending on the target water quality requirements of the end users.
Are any waste streams generated during the treatment of produced water?
Yes, liquid and solid waste streams generated during produced water treatment require proper disposal. After desalination processes, the falling and scaling forming constituents in produced water are further concentrated, and the brine needs appropriate treatment to avoid the clogging of saltwater disposal wells. In the Permian and the San Juan Basin, produced water contains elevated concentrations of naturally occurring radioactive materials. It's important to conduct studies and measurements to assess the radioactive levels of soil waste from chemical precipitates and solids generated from crystallizer. This is essential for the development of a comprehensive solid waste management plan.
In In Hightower's direct testimony submitted in this matter, there is an assertion that produced water can be effectively and consistently treated to, quote, a safe level. Does the department concur with this assertion?
No. First, the department would question how Mr. Hightower would define safe. This term should need to be quantified in the regulations to provide clear guidance. Second, as stated in Hightower's first, Louis, and my direct written testimony, the technologies to treat produced water are still being researched due to significant variability in characteristics across different regions. According to a detailed produced water treatment report from the New Mexico State University Civil Engineering Department, several mature technologies could be carefully selected to develop a treatment train for produced water, depending on the initial water chemistry of produced water and the required quality of the end product. However, several technical challenges arise due to its high salinity and other concerns in produced water. Treating highly saline produced water, such as produced water in the Permian Basin, is energy intensive and comes with a high cost. The report concludes that while emergency technologies like ultra high pressure reverse osmosis, membrane distillation, supercritical water desalination, or forward osmosis have the potential to significantly reduce costs. They are still in the development phase and are not yet ready for full-scale implementation. Lastly, there is still a lack of robust data concerning the full and complete characterization of untreated and treated produced water, treatment methodologies, effluent quality, and the management of treatment waste streams. Therefore, before conclusively asserting that produced water can be consistently treated to a safe level, it's important to conduct a more detailed region-specific studies.
Thank you. Are there any additional concerns regarding the assertion that produced water can be treated effectively and consistently to reach a safe level?
Yes, a significant concern highlighted in my direct testimony is the presence of unknown chemicals in produced water. As I mentioned, hydraulic fracture operations involve the use of chemical additives, and some additives are not fully disclosed due to the trade secrets. The toxicity of these unidentified chemicals cannot currently be determined.
The New Mexico, the Produced Water Consortium's technical data and information report highlights that even after treatment, some constituents in produced water can remain problematic at low concentrations for specific reuse applications. Does the department concur with this statement?
Yes, the department concur with this statement. As discussed in my direct written testimony, while current treatment technologies may reduce the presence of the constituents in the produced water, they are unable to remove all constituents. Currently, there is a significant lack of robust data regarding the characterization of untreated and treated produced water, treatment methodologies, effluent quality, and the measurement of treatment waste streams. including a lack of defensive and reliable data of underpin the development of a mature treatment chain to attain a consistent and protective water quality for discharge or produced water in New Mexico. Certain elements, such as heavy metals, naturally occurring radioactive materials, remain a toxicity even at low concentrations. This statement is in direct contradiction with Mr. McHattle's testimony, which states that the studies show treated produced water is safe, and supports the department proposal to specifically prohibit discharge of treated or untreated produced water, and requiring submittal of an NOI, so the department can determine that no discharge will occur before a project can proceed.
Numerous studies highlight the importance of total dissolved solids, or TDS, in the treatment and reuse of produced water. Is TDS the sole concern in produced water?
No, it's important to note that TDS is just one concern of the complex composition of produced water. As discussed in my direct written testimony, produced water can contain thousands of constituents, some of which can remain toxic even at low concentrations. For example, trace amounts of heavy metals are detectable in produced water from the Permian Basin. Heavy metals are a group of metals and metalloids that have relatively high density and are toxic even at concentrations in the parts per billion or microgram per liter. Unlike organic pollutants, heavy metals are non-biodegradable and bioaccumulate in living organisms through direct exposure as well as through the food chain.
Apart from salts and metals, are there any other concerns that should be taken into consideration?
Yes, in addition to salts and metals, produced water also serves as a reservoir for very high concentrations of naturally occurring radioactive materials, which is one of the major environmental concerns with the recovery of oil and gas from unconventional wells. For instance, investigations conducted by the New Mexico State University indicate that produced water samples from the Permian Basin have mean total radium concentrations of 469.3 picocalories per liter. This is almost 100 times the domestic water supply criterion. In the state standards for interstate and intrastate surface waters, 20.6.4 nmic, and over 15 times the livestock watering criterion for total radium. Radium poses significant environmental and health risks, underscoring the importance of appropriate produced water management to prevent adverse impacts. Moreover, other constituents of concern in produced water include BTEX, PES, and PFAS, further complicating its compositions and potential risks. Therefore, further studies are necessary to fully understand its compositions and potential impacts, supporting the intent of the proposed rule.
Is it presently feasible to utilize treated or untreated produced water as a new water source to alleviate the freshwater shortage in New Mexico?
No, as discussed before, produced water is not fully characterized, and using either treated or untreated produced water as a freshwater source jeopardizes the protection of ground and the surface water, as well as human health. Additionally, technologies for treating produced water are still in research phase. In light of this, the department has determined that allowing the discharge of treated or untreated produced water into the environment is premature and cannot currently be done in a way that complies with the Water Quality Act.
Does the proposed rule conflict with Governor Lujan Grisham's 50-year water action plan, specifically regarding the Action B, new water supply, which illustrates that New Mexico must develop new sources of water?
No, the primary objective of this proposed rule is to conserve and protect New Mexico's very limited freshwater resources, as mandated under the Water Quality Act and the governor's 50-year water action plan.
Are there any reuse applications specified in the state's standards for interstate and intrastate surface waters?
No, there are no reuse applications specified in 20.6.4 900 mic. When discussing the numerical and narrative criteria for applications in 20.6.4 mic, it's necessary for the department to clarify that these are not applications, but rather designated use. The surface water quality standards in 20.6.4 mic include designated uses for surface waters of the state, criteria to protect those uses, including general criteria in 20.6.4.13 mic, and an anti-degradation policy to maintain and protect water quality. Water quality in surface water must meet the most stringent criteria for pollutant in order to protect its designated use.
Why does the proposed rule prohibit the discharge of treated or untreated produced water into the environment as supported by primary scientific research?
As I stated before, there is a significant lack of robust data regarding the characterization of untreated and treated produced water, treatment methodologies, effluent quality, and the management of treatment waste streams. Given the variability and the unknowns, the department has determined that allowing the discharge of treated or untreated produced water into the environment is premature. That cannot currently be done in a way that complies with the Water Quality Act.
Would the authorized produced water demonstration or industrial projects under this proposed rule pose a risk to water quality?
No, as outlined in the proposed rule, authorized produced water demonstration and industrial projects will not discharge in a manner that may directly or indirectly affect ground or surface water, thereby posing no risk to water quality. Demonstration and industry projects will only be authorized after showing that there is no potential discharge.
What impact will the proposed rule have on primary scientific research after it becomes effective?
As discussed in my direct written testimony, there is a significant lack of defensive and reliable data to underpin the development of a mature treatment chain to attain a consistent and protective water quality for discharged or produced water in New Mexico. Therefore, the implementation of the department's proposed regulations is essential to support produced water demonstration projects in the state and drive produced water treatment research, which will inform the development and the adoption of standards specific to treated produced water. This rule aims to establish necessary restrictions, promote research efforts, and equip regulatory bodies with essential resources to make sure that no discharge compromise the quality of New Mexico's ground and surface water.
All right, thank you, Dr. Hu, for your testimony. Madam Hearing Officer, we would request a comfort break before our next witness.
Yes, excellent idea. Thank you, Dr. Hu.
Okay,
Let's come back at, let's see, 3:30.
and
12 minutes.
this will be our last witness after this.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. No, we're always busy. What's up? Hmm. Well, what what do we have? Yeah, okay, the well itself. Uh-huh. Well, what I would do is, you know how Carl likes to, well, you created that cover for the other application. Yeah, yes. So in that vein, I would go ahead and
All right, let's come back from the break, please. Mr. Knight.
Madam Hearing Officer, Chair, and members of the commission, I would like to call my final witness, Susan Antonia Lucas Camat,
Okay,
if she could be sworn.
yes. Ms. Kamat, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I do.
And if you would spell your name for the transcript.
Susan Antonia Lucas Kamath, Susan Antonia, and my last name is Lucas Kamat, 2 words with a space, Lucas, space Kamat.
And what is your current position?
I am the Point Source Regulation Section Manager with the New Mexico Environment Department Surface Water Quality Bureau.
And how long have you held this position?
I have been the Point Source Manager for 3 years.
And what duties are entailed by this position?
As stated in my resume as NMED Exhibit 11, as the Point Source Program Manager, I manage 4 teams that implement the permit and certification and compliance and enforcement processes for discharges to surface waters in New Mexico. I directly supervise 4 staff and indirectly supervise 6 staff, oversee and review certifications of over 90 National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or NPDES, individual permits, and 6 NPDES general permits, and I oversee compliance inspections for NPDES permits and unpermitted discharges. I develop policy, guidelines, templates, and regulations related to point source regulation and compliance.
Please summarize your post-high school education.
I have a Bachelor of Science degree in Earth, Atmospheric, and Planetary Sciences, Geophysics option from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I also completed graduate classwork in hydrology, water resources, geochemistry, and statistics at the University of New Mexico Earth and Planetary Sciences Department.
Do you hold any certifications or have you received any additional professional training relevant to the proceeding before the commission today?
Yes, I have received training and obtained various certifications applicable to my position. Specific to the proceeding, I have completed training from the EPA on quality assurance management and NPDES permit writing. I also have certification as a geographic information systems analyst, a project coordinator, and project management information systems specialist from the University of New Mexico. A full list of my training and certifications can be found in my resume, filed as NMED Exhibit 11.
Can you tell us about your work experience relevant to the proceeding today?
My first job in New Mexico was at Myox Corporation, a capital equipment manufacturer of on-site mixed oxidant generators for a variety of potable and industrial water treatment applications. At Myox, I performed design review for municipal and industrial projects and prepared project plans and specifications, bid documents, design packages, and submittals for U.S. and international projects. I've been employed with the state of New Mexico since May 2005 and have held my current position with the Surface Water Quality Bureau since April 2021. During my 19 years with the state of New Mexico, I've been employed by both NMED and MNERD. I began my state career as a mining geological specialist in the Mining and Minerals Division, working for 6 years on mine registration, mining reclamation and remediation in uranium, potash, hard rock, and sand and aggregate mines, and managing the Legacy Uranium Mine Inventory Project. I spent 9 years with the NMED Department of Energy Oversight Bureau as an environmental scientist, staff manager, and bureau chief. At DOE Oversight, I performed and oversaw multimedia environmental surveillance monitoring of inorganic, organic, and radionuclide pollutants for groundwater, surface and stormwater, wastewater, soil and sediment, and vegetative media. I was the NMED Risk Management Bureau Chief for 4 months, where I was responsible for the department-wide health and safety program, job hazards analysis, and loss control prevention. I was employed for 1 year by the OCD Environmental Bureau, where I permitted produced water recycling facilities and containments, surface waste management facilities, and pit below grade tanks. Since November 2021, I've been in the NMED Surface Water Quality Bureau Point Source Regulations section as both the municipal team supervisor and then the program manager. I have over 6 years of direct experience implementing ground and surface water protection regulations as found in 20.6.2 NMAC, and over 4 years of direct experience implementing standards for interstate and intrastate surface water regulations as found in 20.6.4 NMAC. My other work experience can be found in my resume filed as NMED Exhibit 11.
Have you authored or co-authored any articles relating to your professional training?
Yes, I have 6 publications, which include co-authoring Uranium Resources in the Grants Uranium District, New Mexico, an update published in the New Mexico Geological Society's 64th Field Conference guidebook, co-authoring Landmines, GIS monitors potentially hazardous abandoned sites, published in GeoWorld, and authoring Mining Review New Mexico, published in Mining Engineering. A full list of my publications can be found in my resume.
Have you reviewed the direct technical testimony as filed by the other parties in this matter?
Yes.
And did you submit technical testimony in this matter?
Yes, my direct technical testimony was filed as NMED Exhibit 6. My rebuttal testimony was filed as NMED Exhibit 180.
Do you have any changes or corrections to that technical testimony?
Yes, there was a typographical error in my rebuttal testimony, NMED Exhibit 180. On page 13, line 19, the citation 20.6.2, 201 NMAC should be 20.6.2, 2001 NMAC.
And then do you adopt your pre-filed written testimony here today as corrected?
I do.
What is the nature of your testimony today?
My testimony will summarize the reasoning and supporting evidence the department used to draft the proposed regulations, the implications of not adopting the regulations, and how the department envisions the implementation of the proposed regulations.
Can you briefly describe the sections of the proposed rule that you are testifying to today?
Yes, today I will be testifying regarding 4 topics for the proposed regulations as detailed in my written technical testimony, NMED Exhibit 6, and my written rebuttal testimony, NMED Exhibit 180. First, my direct testimony covers the general authority given to constituent agencies of the Water Quality Control Commission that can propose regulations to the Commission. Second, my testimony focuses on multiple definitions that are used in the proposed regulation. Third, I will testify regarding the implementation of the proposed regulation. Lastly, I will testify regarding the potential consequences for not adopting the proposed regulations.
And can you briefly describe the reasoning for these sections?
Yes, my testimony will discuss the authorities granted to the Commission and constituent agencies by the Water Quality Act and the Produced Water Act, and will provide the legislative and regulatory context under which the department drafted the proposed regulations. The definition section as proposed will provide the department with the necessary clarity and support to implement standardized reuse permitting, as well as the proposed regulations specific to surface water discharges. The proposed regulations explicitly prohibit the discharge of treated or untreated produced water outside the oil and gas industry.
The first topic you mentioned is the authority of the department, the authority that we are relying on for the proposed regulations. Can you provide a brief summary of this portion of your direct testimony?
Yes, as previously testified by Mr. Jason Herman, the Water Quality Act was amended by the Produced Water Act in 2019. The Produced Water Act specifically directed the Water Quality Control Commission to adopt regulations to be administered by the Environment Department for many aspects of treated produced water, including the use of treated produced water outside the oil and gas industry. The Quality Act already contained the requirements necessary to promulgate regulations for surface and groundwaters with directions on what the commission should give weight to and what circumstances are relevant to the rulemaking process.
Did any party object to this section?
Yes, as Mr. Herman testified, Wild Earth Guardians, New Energy Economy, and New Mexico Oil and Gas Association objected to the proposed regulations. The New Mexico Mr. Hightower also objected to the regulations.
And what is the basis of these objections?
As Mr. Herman testified, objections regarding the authority and underlying directives stem from a common misunderstanding of the interactions of other regulations, the proposed regulations, and the existing ground and surface water protection regulations.
What is the department's response to these objections?
Mr. Herman testified to the department's response to these objections by Wild Earth Guardians, New Energy Economy, and the New Mexico Oil and Gas Association. The Commission has promulgated surface water protections under both 20.6.2 NMAC and 20.6.4 NMAC. As I testified in my written rebuttal, NMED Exhibit 180, the authority of the Water Quality Act, Produced Water Act, and Commission is to protect New Mexico's surface waters. States have the authority under their constitutions, supported by federal acts, to promulgate regulations that serve their needs at states. I hope that the state of New Mexico will not voluntarily surrender their sovereign rights to protect their surface waters to any other state, including Texas. The proposed regulations will support the NMED Section 401 certification process for federal NPDES permits as detailed in 20.6.2 NMAC, and ensure that New Mexico's surface water quality standards, including both narrative and numeric criteria of designated uses of receiving streams, are met for New Mexico's designated uses. As discussed in Ms. Fulham's rebuttal testimony, while the alignment of standards for the reuse of produced water across state boundaries may be efficient for industry, it may not be practical or legally enforceable. The mechanism in the proposed rule are crucial to the protection of human health and the environment under the state's Water Quality Act and 20.6.4 NMAC.
The second topic you identified is the definitions used in the proposed regulation. What definitions does your direct testimony address, and can you provide a brief summary of your testimony?
My direct testimony identifies NPDES related definitions, which include definitions for 1, the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, NPDES permit, and pretreatment. The department proposes to include these definitions by reference to their controlling federal regulation under the Federal Clean Water Act. These definitions will assist the department in the interpretation of the proposed regulations and maintain consistency with other state or federal regulations. And then 2, new definitions included specifically for implementation of the proposed regulation include NTUs, which is nephelometric turbidity units. This definition will assist the department in the implementation of the proposed regulations.
Right, and just to be clear, that was nephelometric turbidity units.
Yes.
Word of the day. Did any party object to this section?
Yes, multiple parties objected to the inclusion of these definitions, including Amigos Bravos and Sierra Club and New Energy Economy. And
what was the basis of those objections?
The major objection is that the definitions are not used in the proposed regulations and they're unnecessary and should be deleted.
And the department's response to those objections?
Ms. Fulham responded to these objections in her rebuttal testimony. The inclusion of definitions for terms not found elsewhere or found within another definition does not set precedents, as there are several other regulations adopted by the Commission that contain definitions not found elsewhere or found within another definition. Mr. Herman testified in his rebuttal testimony that the inclusion of definitions for the purpose of implementation of the regulations is a consideration that deserves attention. The purpose of a rule to is assist in the implementation of a statute. Part of the implementation is being able to explain how a regulation works. And definitions like these proposed definitions assist in that explanation. Definitions also assist with implementation of compliance and enforcement processes. The definitions included for MPDS help explain what an MPDS permit is to the public and regulated community, and that an MPDS permit is not a groundwater discharge permit.
Yeah. Is a discharge permit interchangeable with an NPDES permit?
No, until you have worked in permitting and certification, you don't understand how often the public and the regulated community think that discharge permit, DPs, and MPDS permits are interchangeable permits. The effluent limit criteria and pollutant lists are different for groundwater, 20.6.2 NMAC, and surface water, 20.6.4 NMAC. And the reporting requirements are different between a DP and an MPDS permit. Permits are not interchangeable.
Family or less than 90,000.
Are there facilities that have both a groundwater DP and an NPDES permit?
Yes, several municipalities in the state have an MPDS permit for their treated wastewater treatment plant effluent discharge to a river or a stream, and also have a groundwater discharge permit for reuse of the same treated wastewater treatment plant effluent for uses like irrigation.
So how would someone know what an NPDES permit is?
If there is a definition of MPDS and MPDS permit, the public and regulated community can refer to the definition to learn what an MPDS permit is. The public reading 20.6.8 MMAC will not know what an MPDS permit is if the definition is removed.
The third topic you identified is the implementation of the proposed regulations. Can you provide a brief summary of your written testimony on that subject?
Yes, the department plans on implementing the regulations upon adoption of the regulations by the Commission. Implementation will not include any changes to the manner in which the department has already been applying the requirements of the Water Quality Act and Produced Water Quality Act for the Section 401 certifications. Implementation will include the ability to cite 20.6.8A 401 1 and 2 in MAC to prohibit produced water discharges to surface waters.
Did any party object to these amendments?
Yes, New Energy Economy, the New Mexico Oil and Gas Association, and Mr. Hightower objected to the proposed regulations.
And again, from your understanding, what is the basis of these objections?
Much of the testimony filed by New Energy Economy, the New Mexico Oil and Gas Association, and Mr. Hightower made assertions on reuse water quality. The parties presented little evidence or valid examples to support their objections.
And what is the department's response to these objections?
The objective of the proposed rule is to supplement the procedures for certifying federal permits found in 20.6.2, 2001 to 2003 NMAC. All discharges to surface waters in New Mexico must meet surface water quality standards found in both 20.6.2 and 20.6.4 NMAC. As testified by Dr. Hu, treated produced water has unknown effluent water quality. Due to the unknown produced water effluent quality, the department will deny State of New Mexico Clean Water Act 401 certifications for proposed MPDS permits of treated produced water discharges to surface waters to protect the designated uses of the receiving surface waters. The prohibition in this regulation of produced water discharges to surface waters is needed to support this Section 401 certification denial and prevent contaminants from entering New Mexico's surface waters.
What are so-called designated uses?
So designated uses are the goals and expectations for how each water body is used. Designated uses are outlined in 20.6.4 NMAC as domestic water supply, irrigation and irrigation storage, livestock watering, wildlife habitat, primary and secondary contact recreation, aquatic life, which is cold water, cool water, and warm water, fish culture, public water supply, and industrial water supply.
And what are water quality criteria?
As defined in 20.6.4.7 NMAC, water quality criteria are elements of state water quality standards expressed as pollutant or constituent concentrations. Levels are narrative statements, and they represent a quality of water that supports a use. When criteria are met, water quality will protect the designated uses.
How do you select criteria for surface water?
Water quality criteria are not pick and choose, nor are they either or. There has been considerable reference implying that treated produced water discharges should be allowed because water quality meets irrigation standards, which is only one of the designated uses in a surface water. And the department would argue that we do not know if produced water even meets the water quality criteria for irrigation, because as testified by Dr. Hu, treated produced water has unknown water quality. A discharge must meet all criteria for each of the designated uses in the receiving water and must not degrade existing uses.
What is anti-degradation?
Anti-degradation is a regulatory policy and implementation procedure adopted by NMED to protect existing uses of surface waters. All new and expanded discharges in New Mexico must have a completed anti-degradation analysis, taking into account the discharge of toxic pollutants. The results of the anti-degradation analysis may be used to set effluent limit conditions in a Section 401 certification.
Okay, and what is a Section 401 certification?
New Mexico does not have delegation for the federal NPDES program under Section 402 of the Clean Water Act. Therefore, all NPDES permits in New Mexico are issued by EPA. Under Section 401 of the Clean Water Act, EPA may not issue an NPDES permit that may result in a discharge of pollutants into waters of the United States unless a state water quality certification is issued or waived. The department has 4 options when making a Section 401 certification decision for a draft NPDES permit. 1, grant the certification. 2, grant the certification with conditions. 3, deny the certification. Or 4, waive the certification directly or waive by failing or refusing to act within the established reasonable period of time.
What are toxic pollutants?
Toxic pollutants, as defined in 20.6.4.7 T2, means those pollutants or combination of pollutants, including disease-causing agents, that after discharge and upon exposure, ingestion, inhalation, or assimilation into any organism, either directly from the environment or indirectly by ingestion through food chains, will cause death, shorten lifespans, disease, adverse behavioral changes, reproductive or physiological impairment, or physical deformations in such organisms or their offspring.
How do you test for the presence of toxic pollutants?
Whole effluent testing, which I'll call wet from here on out, can be performed to determine if toxic pollutants are discharged in toxic amounts for acute, i.e. mortality, versus chronic, i.e. reproductive exposures. Wet tests measure wastewater's effects on a specific organism's ability to survive, grow, and reproduce. A wet test can identify that a discharge is toxic, but does not identify the specific pollutant or combination of pollutants that is toxic. Wet testing results are specific to species. Species used in wet tests are marine or freshwater, and many species are sensitive to specific toxics. Wet testing is not a one-time test. It can be part of an anti-degradation analysis required for Section 401 certification of a discharge, and a Section 401 certification may condition for continued wet testing at set frequencies. Wet testing is used with, not in lieu of, targeted analysis.
Can a person discharge produced water for beneficial use west of the 98th meridian?
Federal regulations at 40 CFR 435, which is NMAD Exhibit 202, provide for direct discharge of produced water west of the 98th meridian if there is a beneficial use for agricultural or wildlife propagation in the immediate receiving waters, and if the produced water is actually put to the agricultural or wildlife propagation beneficial use at the point of discharge and time of discharge. Applicants cannot simply state there is a beneficial use. You must use the EPA published beneficial use tool for agriculture and wildlife watering for discharges west of the 98th meridian, which was NMED Exhibit 208. Additionally, Section 404 applies to all discharges west of the 98th meridian.
No, is that Section 401?
Yes, I'm sorry, Section 401.
Okay. What about discharges from a centralized waste treatment plant?
A centralized waste treatment plant is a standalone waste treatment plant and recovery facility that receives materials from off-site. Oil treatment and recovery is one of the 4 centralized waste treatment subcategories. Discharges from centralized waste treatment plants are still subject to Section 401 certification. As detailed in NMED Exhibit 170, the discharge cannot supersede other applicable state, like 20.6.2 and 20.6.4 INMAC, and federal regulations. The EPA report titled EPA Report, Detailed Study of the Centralized Waste Treatment Point Source Category for Facilities Managing Oil and Gas Extraction Waste, details that approved analytical methods do not exist for many constituents found in oil and gas extraction waste. In addition, some constituents, such as total dissolved solids, found in oil and gas extraction waste, can interfere with EPA-approved analytical methods and significantly affect the ability to detect and quantify the level of some analytes. The current effluent limit guidelines at 40 CFR Part 437 do not contain many limitations for many of the pollutants commonly found in oil and gas extraction wastes. Many of these pollutants are not included on the current list of priority pollutants. Documented and potential impacts to both aquatic life and human health related to discharges from centralized waste treatment facilities treating oil and gas extraction wastewater exist due to the prevalence of some pollutants. Levels of pollutants downstream from centralized waste treatment facility discharges have been reported to exceed applicable thresholds, such as primary and secondary drinking water standards and acute and chronic water quality criteria for the protection of aquatic life.
So discharges west of the 98th meridian and from centralized waste treatment facilities are required to have a Section 401 certification?
Yes, discharges west of the 98th meridian and discharges from a centralized waste treatment facility are subject to 401 certification and must meet water quality standards, including all designated uses in a receiving water, numeric and narrative criteria, narrative toxic pollutant criteria, and anti-degradation requirements.
Right. And finally, the fourth topic you identified is the potential consequences of not adopting the proposed regulations as drafted. Can you provide a brief summary of your testimony on that subject?
Yes, the regulations that are in place now do not have the protections and mechanisms necessary to adequately protect ground and surface waters from discharges of treated produced water. The permitting regulations in 20.6.2 and 20.6.4 INMAC do not explicitly prohibit treated produced water discharges to surface or groundwaters, nor do they prevent pollutants from contaminating our water resources. The proposed regulation prohibits the discharge of produced water through the general requirements section of the proposed regulations, found at 20.6.8 400A. The proposed regulations also close an existing loophole in the procedures for 401 certifications of MPDS permits as required in 20.6.2 2001 INMAC, which do not authorize the department to deny a Section 401 certification of a federal NPDS permit on the basis of the source or type of water being discharged. Failure to promulgate the regulations as proposed and with explicit prohibitions would cause surface waters of the state to be at greater risk of contamination.
Thank you very much. That completes our presentation of our oral testimony, and the witnesses would like to come up and sit as a panel for questions from the board, from the
Thank you,
commission.
Mr. Knight.
Sorry.
Yes, thank you. So pursuant to the pre-hearing order, the commissioners will ask their questions first, and then we will turn to the parties in reverse order of presentation. So I'll mix it up, but I'll start with Commissioner Behill once we have the witnesses arrayed at the witness table. And you can always change your mind.
Do we decide?
Mr. Knight, were you going to offer your exhibits as well? Okay.
Yeah, if there's, we would request at this time, if there's no objection, that our NMED exhibits 1 through 208 be admitted into the record now that the witnesses have testified.
All right, I'm going to pause for an objection rather than calling on all 9 parties. I don't hear an objection. So exhibits 1 through 108 are admitted.
Sorry, that's 1 through 208.
Excuse me, 208. All right. So just to remind folks, that's Miss Murphy there on the end, Dr. Hu, Ms. Fulham, Mr. Herman, and Ms. Lucas Kamat. Commissioner Vigil, do you have questions of the department panel at this time? All right. Again, you can change your mind. Commissioner Brankard.
Thank you. Just a few. Yeah, I'll start with the reuse issues.
So does the definition of reuse water include gray water?
Only in the effect that it doesn't conflict with the way the Water Quality Act excludes gray water under 250 gallons per day from residential uses.
But that exception is not in the definition of reuse water.
Correct. I think we, sorry, I should be doing this more formally. Thank you for your question, Commissioner, Chair, Hearing Officer. Yes, that definition is not included verbatim in the reuse water definition. It is, I want to say implied, would be probably the worst word I could think of to use. That's a good one to get out of the gate with.
Okay, so I heard testimony that we have a number of discharge permits, 95 or so, that currently involve reuse water. And now we're talking about applications for the reuse water. Do the current discharge permits have applications in them?
Madam Hearing Officer, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Rankert. The existing discharge permits that we have do identify where they apply the treated wastewater. However, as we use the terms, they can be all over the place. So we have some that have applications like irrigation, but then we have some that just say surface reuse area. And so these definitions would allow us to incorporate actual terminology and with the restrictions based on where they would be discharging. So it's hit or miss right now, and we're needing to get that tied in.
Okay, so then a couple questions to follow on that. If the proposed rules just simply says reuse can't be direct or indirect potable applications, correct?
Could you rephrase that, or?
And you can't use you can't have an application of direct or indirect potable applications for reuse water. Is that what the current
I believe-
proposed rule or the proposed rule says?
Yeah, I believe what you're asking is if we can use wastewater for direct and indirect potable reuse applications.
Well, I'm not talking about the proposed, I'm talking about the rule.
Right.
Okay, there's a prohibition against using it for potable applications in the proposed rule, reuse water.
There is a prohibition for produced water to be used in any application. However, as Mr. Herman spoke to, the indirect and direct potable applications are limited to just domestic wastewater, and they would be only for feasibility studies.
Commissioner Brankert, if I could possibly usurp your question with the subsection A of 201 is what you're referring to. That says the department shall not approve a discharge permit or a discharge permit modification that includes discharges of reuse water for direct or indirect potable applications, except for those authorized applications identified in subsection B of 201.
Right, so
That's the basis of your
that's
question.
what I'm talking about. That's it. Okay, so why not do the opposite also and say that every new discharge permit for reuse water must include the applications of the reuse water?
Commissioner Brankert, that's exactly what we would be doing. We would
Okay, but you're not putting it in the rule. You're not saying that.
We have not expanded on the domestic reuse portion because we do have guidelines that talk a little bit to those types of applications, but we don't have them defined anywhere. And so until we do propose a reuse, the language for the domestic portion of the reuse rule, we will continue to lean on the guidelines, but use the applications that are defined in the rule.
Okay, so does this will this mean that as we go forward, each of these 95 existing discharge permits, say as they come up for renewal, that you will modify them to define specifically which applications are used as defined in this new rule.
Correct.
Okay, so everybody who has one of these permits can expect it to be modified.
Commissioner Brankard, the permits come up for renewal every 5 years unless they modify the location or the type of discharge. So if they propose to modify, we would then start using these new definitions for the application specifically, rather than just coming up with something. And then those that are new would use these new definitions for applications specifically.
Okay.
So everybody's on the same line.
So now for all those 95 discharge permits that have reuse, do any of them currently allow direct or indirect potable application?
No,
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Brankert. The current situation is the city of Rio Rancho does have a discharge permit that has proven a connection to a potable source, but we do not identify that as an indirect potable reuse permit in the discharge permit itself. They are an underground injection control discharge that discharges directly to groundwater, and we treat it as such under the UIC and the existing 3103 standards. So the answer is yes, but no.
Yeah, so that was a whole area that I don't understand, that I sort of get into, but I know the department is getting more into discharge permits for storage, right?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Brankert. Yes, the current permit process allows us to do, through the UIC regulations, aquifer storage and recovery permitting, Bear Canyon infiltration project with the Water Utility Authority. Plus, there's a couple of other ones. I know multiple communities right now are exploring the idea of that. But in those instances, they are not treated domestic wastewater. They're treated surface water, or in some cases, untreated surface water that is used for the aquifer storage and recovery.
Okay, so this is not a wastewater.
So with Rio Rancho, it is. The Albuquerque, Bernalillo County Water Utility Authority projects are not.
All right. Okay, so I'll try to move on here. Produced water. It seems that you have a program in place to approve these projects, these study projects, but now you want to put that program into the rules.
Yes, thank you for the question, Mr. Brankard, Chair, Madam Hearing Officer. I'm told at some point I can stop doing that, but I'll just keep going. The current process, we have utilized our leverage with the New Mexico Produced Water Research Consortium in order to encourage proponents to submit to us an NOI. I want to try to back up a little bit. You use the word approve, and in this context, we generally try to avoid the word approved in saying that we review the notice of intent to determine whether or not we'd have regulatory oversight or authority over that project, and then issue them a discharge permit required letter, could be a bad thing, or a no discharge permit required letter, which is the goal. Sure. Come on.
Okay, so there are currently approved demonstration projects. Are there any currently approved industrial projects?
There are, let me clarify, please, for produced water.
Produced water.
There are currently at least 2 projects that have proposed an industrial type process in their notices of intent that we have sent them no discharge permit required letters for. They have not operated or begun those projects.
I'm confused in section 401A and B, which the those rules, A and B, plus the definitions that you're using, industrial project, demonstration project, the two types of demonstration projects, none of them seem to use the words produced water. So does sections 400A and B apply to all reuse projects?
No, because they're in the produced water reuse section of the regulations as an umbrella, anything that falls under those subsections would be produced water specific.
Well, it would help if you use the words produced water to limit what those sections are for, I guess, would be my suggestion. But to get back to your, what you just said a minute ago about how you're not really approving these projects, which seems to go against your own language. 400A4 says that these projects would be authorized to operate by the department. Okay, and 400C1C says ED must make a determination that the projects meet the requirements of these sections. But it seems like you're trying to create this category of what you call it, a non-permit. It looks like a permit, but you're not calling it a permit because you don't want to call it a permit, right?
I wouldn't characterize it specifically in that manner. I would say that there's considerable numbers of projects that submit to us a notice of intent for any other type of project, like emptying a potable water tank in Santa Fe in order to clean it out, that they would provide us with a notice of intent, and we would respond to them that they do not require a discharge permit for that activity. And this would follow that same process, just specific to produced water.
But not really, right? Because those you're just sort of saying don't need a permit. Here you're saying you need to follow all these requirements for this type of project. How you deal with your produced water. We might even acquire financial assurance. All these things you have to follow for transport, storage, disposal. That's looking to me more like permit requirements. Now here's the problem you face, okay? When you look at the Produced Water Act, of course I can't find it, section 70-13-4, it reads, for uses regulated by the Water Quality Commission pursuant to the Water Quality Act, a person shall obtain a permit from the Department of Environment before using the produced water, the recycled or treated water or treated product or any byproduct of the produced water. Produced Water Act seems to be saying you need to give them permits, but yet you're avoiding calling these permits.
Hearing officer, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Brankard, you point out a very good difference between the different acts. The Produced Water Act does say that you shall obtain a permit. That does not circumvent the Water Quality Act, which says that we must protect ground and surface water. What this rule does is it makes it very clear that it would be outside of NMED's authority if we have this information in the notice of intent of whether or not it falls within the department's authority, because it would be a discharge. If it's not a discharge, we do not have the authority to oversee it, but we need these critical elements, which are additional to the ones that we find under our current NOI process in 20.6.2 NMAC. Because this is a different kind of water source, it has different types of water contaminants associated with it, and therefore different risks and threats to ground and surface water. So although the Act says it shall provide a permit, that does not supersede the Act, the Water Quality Act, that says that we must protect groundwater. So the way to protect groundwater at this point without substantial evidence of what would be protective is to not give a permit, so long as we have the information up front of what they're planning to do with it, and that means not discharging. Hope that clarifies that some. Apparently not.
Because 400 talks about your approval of authorized uses. The Produced Water Act says if you're going to approve uses of produced water, it's a permit.
However, Commissioner Brankard, rules can also have authorizations or the prohibitions. This particular rule that we're proposing is for the prohibitions because there are no authorized uses. None that could be protective of groundwater as far as the evidence that we've been
No, there are
providing.
no authorized discharges. But the uses,
Thank you, Commissioner Baker. That
the uses for these projects are being authorized. And these are uses of produced water for these projects. Demonstration, industrial, they
Commissioner
just don't discharge, okay? Correct?
you make a fair point. I think that the department does have the authority to determine the use. It doesn't have a discharge and outside of our authority. I guess that's how we attempted to word that. And that may not be capturing it completely by using the term uses. I think prior it used to say applications. Produced water. It said something at some point in the iterations, and we took that out because it absolutely is not for discharges.
And my understanding of your question is that there's a dance between the Produced Water Act and the Water Quality Act and our regulations where the Produced Water Act says if you want to use produced water, period, outside of oil and gas, you have to have a permit in order to do so. Therefore, if a researcher wants to take a gallon of produced water outside of the oil and gas industry and utilize it in the laboratory, that would require a permit from the Environment Department. And then our dance is to figure out how to make the Water Quality Act, which says that our authority lies within the protection and the control of the discharge of contaminants. And so we have a conflict between the legislation that was passed, the existing legislation that we have been operating underneath for the last 60 years, 50 years, and then the implementation mechanism of our regulations, where we don't have a mechanism in our regulations to permit anything along the lines of produced water or that can accommodate that type of a discharge or a release of a contaminant. And so we're stuck in a untenable position, having to argue that I agree that the Produced Water Act absolutely says that anyone that uses produced water outside of the oil and gas industry must have a permit. And the Water Quality Act says you don't have the authority to require the permit until someone is releasing a contaminant that would be a threat to ground and surface water.
Well, but it's two different permits, right? I mean, if the Water Quality Act is authorizing one type of permit for discharges and the Produced Water Act is authorizing a different type of permit here.
I respectfully do not agree with that analysis that they are one permit and that the Water Quality Act controls and the Produced Water Act modified the Water Quality Act to just as the dairy rule and the copper rule fell underneath the same Water Quality Act.
Well, but those were the same, those are part of the Water Quality Act. Not, this is a separate statute.
The Produced Water Act modified the Water Quality Act.
Commissioner Brankard, my understanding of the Produced Water Act, and I don't have it up, I can bring it up if you need to. It says that the Water Quality Control Commission under the Water Quality Act will permit. However, there is the amendment in the 2019 Water Quality Act, which states that the commission will adopt regulations for discharges of produced water. And that is where we're here today, but it's not protective of ground or surface water to the ability that we've been able to research and understand produced water in the state of New Mexico, treated or untreated. So essentially, we come before the commission today to adopt and promulgate those regulations pursuant to the Water Quality Act. That has to happen first before we can issue permits under the Produced Water Act that says we shall permit. We don't have we're coming to you today to tell you that the only thing that we could do is non-discharges would be protective of ground and surface water.
Well, I guess I disagree because the language that was put into the Water Quality Act says not just adopt regulations for discharge. It says adopt regulations for discharge, handling, transport, storage, recycling, or treatment for the disposal of treated produced.
as it pertains to ground and surface water protection under the intent and objective of the act.
Right, but isn't that what you're doing with your approvals for these uses?
We are determining that it would be no discharge permit required.
I guess I'm wondering whether this is entirely a dance to avoid the other requirements in the Water Quality Act that pertain to permits. In other words, public notice, opportunity for hearing, appeals, etc.
Commissioner Brinkert, thank you for your input. I think it's valuable. I think it's important. I do not believe that it would be appropriate for this department to issue a discharge permit should somebody apply for the discharge of treated produced water in a way that would be protective of ground and surface water. And that's ultimately the first line of defense for protection, is not writing a permit that would cause contamination. And that's why the notice of intent in 20.6.2 does exist. However, for these, they're non-discharging. Currently, a produced water demonstration project, if they self-determine that they did not want to submit a notice of intent, the way 26.2 reads is that they won't have to submit a notice of intent. This rule kind of closes that and requires all produced water demonstration projects submit a notice of intent for the department to determine that it's not discharging and therefore not a threat to ground or surface water. And so that's the other aspect of this rule that we find critical specifically for produced water.
Okay, well, I guess my position is I think that the Produced Water Act gives both this commission and the Environment Department broader authority than exists in the Water Quality Act. Okay, and that you're not limited by the 60-year-old ideas in the Water Quality Act, that you're given broader authority and responsibility to deal with this, which you're trying to take on. But the question is how take that on.
Thank you.
I'm a little also disturbed when these definitions here, some of them seem to me really vague and broad. If the demonstration project means a bench scale or pilot project, a bench scale project means a project or study conducted in a laboratory. Would that be any study of we've had a whole bunch of discussions about studies of constituents that are in produced water, where people are studying the laboratories. Will those have to go through this whole notice of intent project? Anybody wanting to look at these constituents?
I believe so.
Okay, so all these folks at NMSU and everybody else, they're now going to have to come in through all these, to do all these approvals for a non-permit from the Environment Department.
I'm sorry, for the bench scale and the laboratory projects, no. The demonstration projects and industrial projects, yes.
Demonstration project means a bench scale project.
Sorry, yes. Yes.
All right, I just have quickly try to finish up here with something that's I find sort of troublesome here, which is totally unrelated to these two topics, and that was brought up early on in the testimony of the Environment Department, which is that the Environment Department discovered during this process that the notice that was to be put on the Commission's website did not occur until 48 days prior to this hearing. Am I correctly quoting the testimony?
Madam Hearing Officer, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Brinkert, you are correct.
And is that just not a basic violation of the Commission's procedural rules about notice in this hearing?
I consider that a legal question and beyond the scope of actual testimony.
Sure.
Mr. Brankard, my interpretation of the notice requirements require the notice to be on the department's website. It did appear on the department's website, not specifically on the WQCC page, is my understanding. But it did appear in several other places on the department's website. I think we've responded in some of the motion practice. We've responded to that argument.
Okay, well, the regulation is the definition to provide to public, which comes out of State Rules Act, which is modified in the commission's procedural rules, says provided the public means, number one, posting it on the commission's website. Say departments, commission. So we may decide this is all pretty de minimis, whatever, but anyway, it seemed to be a pretty serious issue. The other one is it also says that the notice has to require a internet link to full access of the text of the rule. And I'm sitting here clicking on the department's, the commission's website. I'm opening up the notice and it says you can obtain a copy of the proposed regulations may be reviewed online at, and there's a link. There we go. Sorry, this page cannot be found.
Commissioner Brinker, I would like to point out that the department provided notice to the extent that the department has ability. We do not have authority for the WQCC's website. We do provide all our information to the Commission and the Office of Public Facilitation. However, to the extent in which the department has the ability to do noticing for all of these hearings, we do undertake that and provide notice. I actually am not in, I can't change, OPF.
And I will just add on to that, there is a known issue at this point in migrating our IT systems. I don't know the technical terms for it, but our resource space, which is where we upload all of our documents, has failed recently within the last 20 days. And we have received daily updates of further and further unhappiness from our IT department that they have not been able to fix it.
And I only discovered this last night, so it could have been fine for everything up to last night. I don't know. Just pointing this out.
I would guess it was within the last 20 days that in the last 7 days it became really bad, where files were being corrupted without us even knowing that a problem had occurred.
And I will like to add, I have worked with the Office of Public Facilitation. They have been exceptional in putting things back up when the entire website crashed and it just said critical error instead of website. So there has been responsiveness when we've been made aware. But again, the department, as far as the Groundwater Quality Bureau and Surface Water Quality Bureau, do not have authority on the Office of Public Facilitation's website.
Thank you. I'm going to stop there.
Commissioner Patton, do you have questions at this time?
Not at this time, no.
All right, thank you. Chair Thompson, do you have questions at this time?
Let me turn it on. So I'd like to start by following up Commissioner Brankard's question about testing, pilot testing, and bench scale testing. So it seems to me pretty clear based on Mr. Herman's answer that if I took a gallon of produce water into my lab and did some testing on it, I would require a permit.
Thank you for the question, Chair. Not a permit, but submission of a notice of intent to us. And to which we would respond whether or not a discharge permit would be required for that activity. If it's in a laboratory, most of the time, it'd be a very easy no discharge permit required letter to write.
And how would I dispose? What would be the legal way of disposing of any residue or treated water or any products from the treatment process?
It would need to be, thank you for the question, Chair. The materials would need to be returned to the appropriate disposal location that they came from or had been intended for originally. We've had multiple projects that have occurred at Bergendorf at the Brackish Water Research Desal facility that have treated the produced water, combined it back together again, and then returned it to whence it came.
Okay, that was gonna follow up. The next scale up would be a field scale.
Mhm.
And I'm aware of field scale testing that has been done at the Brackish Groundwater National Desalination Research Facility,
Mhm.
BGNDRF, I think, Bergendorf. And in years past, they've simply disposed of the residue in their lined impoundments.
Thank you for the question, and I was prepared for this one, luckily. We have received notices of intent for those projects that were in 2015 and 2008 that occurred, and we did respond to them with no discharge permit required and allowed them to dispose of that water into their impoundments knowingly at that time. I wasn't employed at the department when that decision was made. And so they were fairly small quantity projects, and was determined that it happened long ago enough that we would not be able to detect any aspects of that activity at the facility today.
But if they did it today, the test I'm familiar with, they brought a couple 10,000 gallon tankers over and then tested it with the treatment technology. If they did it today, they would require an NOI. Would they also require a permit?
They would. So this is a different situation. The facility has a discharge permit with us already because of their line impoundments as well as other aspects of their activities there. And therefore, at a permitted facility, unless it was fully contained, in and out, pack in, pack out, I think is the term for camping, but they would be combining back and returning it back to the oil and gas field. We would not modify the existing discharge permit for the Brackish Water Research Desalination Facility in order to accommodate a produced water project.
Just sort of an editorial comment. I think that that facility is a good resource, and this is a perfect potential application to test the technologies. So anything that would, I understand and appreciate the need to provide security that we don't contaminate surface or groundwater. But if it impedes the safe testing at a very well-run facility, that would be a problem.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to reiterate there, and I've heard it from the public and I'm kind of hearing it from commission. The notice of intent process is not to inhibit, it's to be aware of the projects that are going on, and that the individual who's doing those demonstration projects has a plan of where they plan to put that, and that it would not be a discharge. So doing a project at Bergendorf is something that we like seeing. We've had a couple of projects there, but the idea that they would assume that they could discharge to those lined impoundments without having to manage that waste source, that's what the NOI process, particularly in this rule, outlines, because it is nuanced with different constituents than we would see in domestic wastewater. We just want to make sure that we know what's going on out in the world of produced water research, that it is not going to be a threat based on the department's determination, not the individual's determination, and that they have a plan for discharging of that wastewater in an appropriate manner that won't impact ground or surface water.
Thank you. And so if someone was going to do a pilot test at Bigendorf or at New Mexico State, they'd file an NOI. I'm trying to review the regs. I don't see that you would have to approve it. It's just simply a notice. Is that true?
It's a notice that we would respond to with either discharge permit required or no discharge permit required.
Okay. Okay. Let me change gears, one last line of questioning. So, Dr. Hu, you worked with Dr. Zhu and she has done some terrific work. One was the analytical methods, and you report that there's something approaching 1,200 compounds that have been identified in produce water.
Madam Hearing Officer, Mr. Chair, Thompson, Commissioner, that paper is not from Dr. Pei's group. It's from it's a literature review paper from the researcher from the Environmental Defense Fund. So it's not a research paper, it's a review paper.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. Well, okay, thank you. I know that Pei has done a lot of work on characterization, and it's good work, very good work. My question is, I will accept that there are about 1,200 compounds in it. How many compounds would there be in municipal wastewater? In, let's say, in Albuquerque, a big municipality with industrial discharges, with hospital discharges, with domestic water, with, you know, illicit discharges of who knows what. How many compounds would you estimate might be in that type of wastewater?
Can we rephrase the question outside of the Albuquerque area?
No, I want to constrain it to a large municipality.
Las Cruces or Santa Fe?
Sure, large municipality.
General,
Yeah, I'm not asking for a specific number. I'm asking, I'll be frank, I'm asking for a comparison to the compound, to the number of compounds that we know about in produce water, to the number of compounds we know about in a large municipal wastewater, and then if it's possible to speculate on what might be the number of compounds we don't know about in municipal wastewater.
I don't have any numbers to quantify that. I know that for the discharges in a large municipality, you're looking at hundreds. And the NPDES permitting requires a full pollutant scan, which is everything that's in 20.6.4 and 900, plus anything that EPA may require because of pretreatment regulations, which are like effluent limit guidelines. I would say that for produced water, we, like, that goes back to lay. Like I say, there's a large number of unknowns. And as I talked about in my testimony, that's actually why you see a lot of wet testing, but also, as I said in my testimony, wet testing is not in lieu of, it's part of the entire permitting scheme.
It's a pretty crude test. I will agree with you.
And I would just add that our understanding of municipal wastewater and sewer sheds and the inputs into them is far greater and far more comprehensive than with produced water. I think that the actual answer to your question may be that produced water has less numbers of constituents. It's more of, do we have the methodologies to test for the constituents that we know we need to be concerned about? Do we know the toxicity data on the constituents that we know we need to be worried about? How about the ones that we don't know if we need to be worried about? And it's those levels of uncertainty that give the regulators nightmares at the end of the day.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Thompson, I would just add, based on some of my background with toxicology. I'm not a toxicologist, but my background and research in it, dose makes the poison. So the number of constituents is not as concerning as the toxicity of those constituents and the unknown constituents. And so as Dr. Hu presented in his testimony, even in small quantities in produced water, that could mean a big difference in whether we would contaminate ground or surface waters.